Hey, you! Guess what? The most magical time of the year is upon us!
Is it Christmas, Mr. Meltdown? Really? Already?
What? No. Ew. Shut up. I'm talking about that magical time of the year where we talk about the best albums released in that year. That's right, distinguished guys, gals, and non-binary pals and metalheads of the internet. It is time to talk about the top 10 best metal albums of 2024. Are you ready? I can't hear you. Wow, okay, I definitely hear you. Goddamn, wow. In my opinion, it was a pretty consistently and thoroughly excellent year for heavy metal and extreme music. So much so that I had a lot of difficulty putting this list together. There were a lot of albums that I genuinely considered that I wanted to put on this list that just did not make the list. They did not make the final cut. And I figured, you know what? Screw it. Instead of doing like 2 or 3 little honorable mentions, why don't we just shout out all of the albums that almost made this list? But first off, I'm gonna have a drink. I don't like that I've gone this long without a drink. That sucks, I hate it, and I'm going to fix that. Oh my god, I feel so much better. First up, we have Cometh the Storm from High on Fire. Brutal, dynamic, sludgy thrash metal with plenty of twists and turns and progressive ideas and different flavors and spices. Next up, we have Mind Burns Alive from Pallbearer. Sonically, this is their least metal album to date, but it is also still, simultaneous to that, their most expressive, their most intimate, their most vulnerable, their most naked, their most stripped down, their most colorful, and as a result, it is still an incredibly effective and cathartic record. Next up, we have Never Neverland from Unto Others. In my opinion, this is the catchiest and most cohesive collections of songs that this gothic heavy metal crew has put out to date. Then we have Moon Tatuya from Aranci Pazuzu. Sure, maybe it's a little bit too garish and abrasive for its own good sometimes, but it is consistently still a very engaging and fascinating slice of weird, avant-garde, experimental, electronic black metal. And finally, we have Highly Irresponsible from Better Lovers. Members of Every Time I Die and the Dillinger Escape Plan bring the best elements of these bands together into something chaotic and fun and explosive and filled with high-energy riffs and hooks. And voila! Those are all of the albums that almost made the top 10. But even if they didn't make it, they're still great and still excellent, and you should still check them out. Now, let's move on to the actual top 10 best metal albums of 2024 list. I should note that as per the norm with any kind of Metal Meltdown list video, this is not a ranked or numbered list. I will be talking about each album in order of release, and when we arrive to what is my number 1 metal album of the year, I will simply tell you. First up, we have Ultra Power from Striker, released February 2nd via Record Breaking Records. This Canadian heavy metal crew has consistently done a really good job of bringing old school style heavy metal to a modern audience. This record, I feel, is their most versatile and varied and dynamic and most full-on fun record yet. They have completely indulged in a kind of glamour and rock and roll decadence and excess I would have expected of a variety of albums from the 1980s. It's got synthesizers, vocoder vocals, funky bass lines, arena rock-sized hooks and melodies, a variety of sizzling, insane guitar pyrotechnics and solos. And it's got a really great sense of humor. Occasionally it throws in some more modern breakdowns and pyrotechnics as well, which I think is really interesting. The whole thing is very well produced. It is the boldest and the shiniest that Striker have ever sounded on a record. For me, when I think about what I really want from a modern heavy metal band, this is it. I don't really care about album number 50 from a legacy band that's been around for 50 fucking years. Nor do I care about yet another underground heavy metal band that is literally just copy-pasting everything that Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and Motorhead already did 40, 50 years ago. This is what I want. This is what I crave. This is the best old school style traditional heavy metal record of 2024, and quite possibly one of the best in recent memory. Next up, we have Sparagmos from Spectral Voice, released February 9th via Dark Descent Records. This thing just straight up sounds like a nightmare. A horrifying, terrifying, crippling nightmare, and I mean that in the absolute best way possible. Tons of muddy, gross, grisly guitars, churning grooves, oppressive, towering walls of noisy deaf doom, demonic and monstrous guttural vocals, haunting atmospheres galore, very raw, cavernous production and sound and feel. I would genuinely compare the experience of listening to Sparagmos to that of being very slowly eaten alive by whatever it is that you fear and dread most in life. It is ferocious and uncompromising and unrelenting and sonically one of the most full-on brutal metal albums in any metal subgenre released in 2024. Approach with caution, but please do approach nonetheless. You won't regret it. Or maybe you will, but you'll regret it in like a cool way, you know? Like a fun way. I mean, not like a fun way, but like a fun way. I hope this makes sense. I'm not sure it does. Next up, we have Moon Healer from Job for a Cowboy, released February 23rd via Metal Blade Records. Wow, February was kind of an awesome month. What the fuck? It really is crazy that there is a 10-year gap between Sun Eater and Moon Healer, because Moon Healer sounds like it really could have just come out immediately after Sun Eater. Hell, it sounds like the two could have been packaged together as a double album, or even released side by side, Use Your Illusion style. I mean, Moon Healer picks up conceptually and musically exactly where Sun Eater left off, with Job for a Cowboy diving into some of the most intricate, complex, melodic, emotionally charged, and expressive, technical and progressive death metal stuff of their career. From what I understand in conversation with Johnny Davey right here on the Metal Meltdown, part of the album was inspired by an unnamed person's experiences with psychedelic drugs and kind of getting out of an internet rabbit hole and getting deep and dark into some weird beliefs and ideas, and I mean, that's represented pretty well in the music. Love the prominent bass tones, love how dark and menacing the record is. I love how there's a lot of room for some genuine melodies too to pop up here and there throughout, some doomy undertones too. Just a really beautiful and immersive album through and through, in my opinion. It is disappointing that it took this long for this album to finally see the light of day, but you know what? It was worth the wait. I'd happily wait another 10 years for the next Job for a Cowboy record. Fuck it. If this is what y'all are putting out, then fuck it. Take all the goddamn time you need. Next up, we have Weibermacht from Folterkammer, released April 19th via Century Media Records. Probably one of the most unique albums of the year, because it has a truly surreal and bizarre combination of sounds and influences. In my original review, I described the sound of Folterkammer and this particular album as experimental, baroque, classical, opera-infused black metal about BDSM and sexual liberation and hot goth German dummy mommies, and believe it or not, that's not even a little bit of an exaggeration. And I stand by that, 110%. It really is not an exaggeration whatsoever. And it's incredibly entertaining and fascinating. I mean, its ability to go into more theatrical and over-the-top territory with these classical and operatic influences, with these different operatic kind of vocal flows and runs, and like all of these belting vocals and this kind of like subject matter as well, while kind of like staying true to the darkness and to the overall essence that is expected of black metal, is incredibly fucking cool. And it's powerful and provocative and brutal and mysterious and honestly a little bit sexy in some parts. I mean, how can you have an album about hot, cool, goth German dummy mommies and have it not be sexy? Alright? Don't fucking look at me weird. Let's all just be honest here for a second. Next up, we have the Stygian Rose from Crypt Sermon, released June 14th via Dark Descent Records. Decibel Magazine, one of the leading voices and authorities in heavy metal and extreme music, in heavy metal and extreme music journalism, named this the best metal album of 2024. And I totally get why. I get it. I understand it. I won't argue for even a second. I was a big fan of 2019's Ruins of Fading Light. In fact, I think that would have been one of my favorite albums of that year as well. But this totally eclipses everything else Crypt Sermon was doing beforehand. It's bigger, it's bolder, it's better, more brutal, more dramatic too as well. There's a bit of a gothic yearning and melodrama all throughout the record, really great storytelling, just really great epic, doomy, heavy metal songcraft too. Like some really massive, really cool riffs and melodies working in unison to create something that just feels really important. It's dark and cinematic and immersive with a lot of body and a lot of nuance. Just a really fucking excellent record that is equal parts beautiful and brutal, equal parts tragic and romantic. It's everything you really want from a really great doom metal record through and through. Next up, we have Hiraeth from Respire, released July 26th via Dynalone Music Incorporated. This is not my number one metal album of the year, but it is my number 2. It doesn't win the gold medal, but it absolutely does win the silver medal. I've really enjoyed Respire's blend of black gaze, post-hardcore, and post-metal. With this particular album, it has been further flavored and complemented with a variety of strings and keyboards and other orchestral elements, influences from other kind of alternative indie, emo music genres and styles, and also conceptually, it is very much about tackling the immigrant experience, you know, the unique kind of perspective that immigrants have, the kinds of like feelings that they kind of go through in going somewhere new, in being somewhere new. And I think that there's a lot about this album that is really relevant right now. And this all works so well with the music, like having these screaming vocals, having these strings, having these keyboards, having these kind of like black gazy, post-hardcore, post-metal influences and sounds all kind of working in tandem in unison together to deliver this story and create this experience. It's beautiful. It's stunning, honestly, you know? Like, on my very first listen, I nearly shed a tear. And ever since then, I mean, I've only grown to love this record more and more. I've only grown to connect with this record more and more as time has gone on. Initially, I gave this album a 4.5 out of 5, and honestly, I think if I were to review it right now, I would give it a 5 out of 5 instead. And you know what? You know what? Fuck it. We're retconning that original score. This is a perfect album. It really is. It's a 5 out of 5 album. I love it. One of the best albums of the fucking year. One of the most beautiful and intimate and I think emotionally brutal records of the year. I think there's a lot that this album says and does that's really important and really effective, and you gotta check it out. If you haven't already, you gotta check it out. Next up, we have Exhaust from Pyrrhon, released September 6th via Willowtip Records, and Exhaust really is kind of a perfect name for this album. Musically, it's exhausting. It is their most complex, their most brutal, their most powerful, their most brazen and bizarre record to date. The same blends of dissonant, technical, avant-garde death metal influences remains intact. Tons of jagged, complex, intricate rhythms and grooves and riffs. There's also new influence brought in from mathcore, making this all the more punishing. It feels like a weird blend of Gorguts, Ulcerate, Botch, and Classic Converge. And on top of this, lyrically and conceptually, this thing does a great job at tapping into the collective exhaustion with society and with divisive politics and with a variety of social political catastrophes that we've seen and experienced over the course of the past few years. Exhaustion with modern life, exhaustion with the daily toll and struggle of life, of working full-time and struggling to make ends meet. The combination of being so brazen and bizarre musically, the combination of these dizzying, technical, avant-garde, mathcore rhythms and riffs and songs and such, with these lyrics that are so provocative and are so much about things that are happening in the world right now, is probably a lot for some people. But I think an album like this is really important because it kind of provides a snapshot as to where we are culturally and socially right now, on top of just delivering some really insane, twisted fucking music. Next up, we have Die Urkatastrophe from Kanonenfieber, released September 20th via Century Media Records and Noisebringer Records. I wasn't going to review this album initially. It wasn't on my radar at all, but I got so many comments, so many DMs, so many messages asking me, pleading with me to listen to this album, to review this album. Y'all were hyping this thing the fuck up, and I totally understand why. In fact, I thank you. I thank you for bugging the fucking shit out of me. It was worth it. War is by no means a unique or unusual or brand new topic within metal music. I mean, for fuck's sakes, there's an entire subgenre of metal called war metal. But the way that Kanonenfieber and the way that Die Urkatastrophe specifically taps into the misery, the anguish, the bloodshed, the horror, the trauma of war, specifically the Great War, is absolutely incredible. The way that it combines ferocious blackened death metal with great melodies and these acidic, sneering vocals, and, you know, a variety of different kind of samples and sound effects. You know, you hear artillery cannons going off, machine guns, you can hear planes flying overhead, tanks and horses, and the moans and the cries, the agonizing screams of injured and dying soldiers. Love that it's all in German, too. Like, that language and that tongue, like, that just does a great job at making it sound all the more fucking evil. Absolutely fantastic album. I'm so happy y'all bugged me about this. If this is the kind of stuff y'all are gonna bug me about, then please bug me more often. Don't bug me about reviewing every Limp Bizkit album. Bug me about shit like this. Please. And now, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, the moment you've all been waiting for, my #1 metal album of 2024, Absolute Elsewhere from Blood Incantation, released October 4th via Century Media Records. This should come as a surprise to absolutely nobody. I went out of my way in my review of this album to label this a cosmic metal masterpiece, the best thing that Blood Incantation have ever put out, and one of the best albums in any genre of 2024. I gave this a very rare 5 out of 5 score. I didn't retcon it, I gave it a 5 out of 5 in that video. And I did so because I believed through and through that this is a perfect record. Blood Incantation pushed themselves here, combined all of their influences together, the psychedelic, the prog, the death metal, everything. Influences from Tangerine Dream, Morbid Angel, you know, all these different bands, all these different sounds and vibes, you know, and they brought it together into something that I feel is incredibly unique, one of a kind, and just extremely entertaining. I was genuinely blown away by so much of what is on this album. I was blown away by how complex it was. I was blown away by how varied it was. I was blown away by how satisfying it was. Like, you have moments that hearken to the more kind of introspective psychedelic prog of something like Pink Floyd, and you have these more other moments that bring to mind like Tangerine Dream and a lot of like synthwave kind of stuff, and you have, you know, other moments that wouldn't be out of place on a classic Morbid Angel or Suffocation record. And the way that it's all brought together in this way that I guess is meant to emulate a message being sent across time and space, some kind of journey across time and space, is amazing. A totally immersive, trippy, sci-fi metal escapade. I love it through and through. I really don't know what I can say about it here that I haven't already said about it in the aforementioned album review and also elsewhere in the past couple of months. It's just incredible. Like, when I think about a perfect record, this is the kind of album that I think of. And finally, we have The Last Will and Testament from Opeth, released November 22nd via Reigning Phoenix Music. Hey, November 22nd was my birthday. Happy birthday to me indeed. Opeth dropped something kind of awesome, just for me on my birthday, not for you. They knew it was my birthday, and they dropped that album. They knew it. Thank you, Opeth. I love you. When this album was announced, and especially once we started hearing music from the album, there was this immediate focus on the return of growling and guttural vocals, and the return of death metal influences. For me, this album isn't great because it has a little bit more death metal than the last couple of records. This album is great because it is Opeth bringing together everything that they've done so well in their classic era, yes, but also from the last couple of years on records like Heritage, Pale Communion, Incata Venenum, and bringing it together into something multifaceted and complex and versatile and oozing with melodrama. Like, the story of this record is really great, with the last will and testament of a patriarch of a family being read to the rest of the family, and there's all these plot twists and reveals and twists and turns, and it's exciting, and it's engaging, and it's really interesting, and, you know, you have all these old school prog rock influences combined with some, like, crushing riffs and some nice grooves and some really beautiful melodies. The Beauty and Beast dynamic, too, switching back and forth between the gutturals and the cleans is really great, and throwing in these other, like, more theatrical vocal dynamics too, I think is really cool. It's frankly some of the best stuff that Opeth have delivered in years. It's the most Opeth that Opeth have really been in a long time. And voila! Those are, in my opinion, the top 10 best metal albums of 2024. It's been an incredible year filled with tons of incredible albums. I've no doubt that your top 10 is gonna look a lot different from mine, and that's fine. That's a good thing, actually. Feel free to share your top 10 below in the comment section or hit me up on Discord. It's all good. I don't mind it. Press this button to subscribe so you get updates on the other end of the year videos that normally come out around this time, including the worst metal albums of the year, the one y'all love more than anything else, boom, other videos, and as always, y'all have yourselves a fantastic fucking day.